All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September edition of the Parker Radio Association Elmer Night. My name is Dan, N2SRK Club President. We're thrilled that you're here tonight. We have a great presentation that's lined up. It's actually going to be an enhanced version of one that we've done before on NVIS. So if this is your first time joining us, we are so glad that you're here. Welcome on board. We're part of an amateur radio group out of Parker, Colorado. A little over 180 members strong, which is pretty great. We actually have members from several different states throughout the country, which is also cool. So if you're joining us maybe in Google Meets as a member, we welcome you here, or maybe you're watching us online on YouTube Live. Again, we're so glad that you're here. Again, we got a great presentation lined up on NVIS, and there's a couple people I'd like to introduce. First is Tom. So Tom, good to have you here, AE0GQ. Obviously off the cover of GQ magazine, obviously. So Tom, we're glad that you're here, and thank you for providing some input on just a really, really cool presentation. And then everybody knows Paul. He's kind of like the norm at Cheers. So Paul, AC5S, he's going to be tag teaming with Tom tonight on the presentation on NVIS. The really cool part about all of our presentations, even though we're repeating this one, there's always something new that I've learned. And what's really cool about going back through some of the YouTube videos and going back through the library of these videos is that there's always something that I've missed on the presentation. So don't be afraid to go back. Make sure you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and also like our videos. It's some good stuff and help spread the word about some of the really good things that are happening. Typically, we have these meetings face-to-face, but obviously with the COVID situation and some restrictions we have at the Douglas County Library where we typically meet, trying to get 50, 60 people into a room right now is just not obtainable. So we've become pretty versatile, and I think versatility within the amateur radio world is what we're all about. So we certainly took the versatility route and started using some online technology, and between Google Meets and YouTube Live, we have some great things that have been lined up since this whole pandemic really kicked off. But nonetheless, here we are, and we are absolutely positively thrilled that you're here tonight. So the best part about what I do is that this is the part where I get to shut up for a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to the professionals. I'm going to turn it over first to Paul, AC5S. He is team member number 1 in tag teaming on NVIS antennas. So Paul, good evening. We're going to, without further ado, throw it over to you. But first and foremost, thank you so much for doing this presentation tonight. Much appreciated.
Hey, you bet, Dan. It's really good to be here tonight to see everybody, so to speak. I wanted to make a couple quick comments. The Elmer Committee, and we sponsor this meeting. We have been really busy. We have been really busy out helping people install antennas, and we have 3 or 4 more on the schedule here for the next 3 weeks. So for those of you that need some help, we are there to help. We did, I think, 50 radials on a vertical antenna installation last week. We did tuning of another vertical antenna last week as well, and we've got a couple more scheduled this week and next week. So if you need any help with your antennas, please let us know. We'll be happy to help out, and we'll send the A-team out. And I'm proud to say that the A-team is made up of about 10 people. We have a bunch of people that are just really, really good at what they do. So, yeah, let us know if you need any help. The co-chair of the Elmer Committee, Terry WB3EVZ, sends his well wishes and his hello, but he's working out in Utah, so he will not be here tonight. But he does say hello to everybody, and we're glad that he has work, but he's spending most of his time in Utah. So if you see Terry or hear Terry on the radio, make sure you say hi to him, because I think he's getting kind of lonely out there, actually. Okay, well, we're going to get started here with this presentation. So let me go ahead and see if we can get this thing going. And let me find it over here. Okay, before we get going, let me check with our studio control operator.
Yep, everything's looking good.
Okay, so we're going to start out tonight. We're going to do a presentation called NVIS. And if you're not familiar with NVIS, I think by the end of the presentation, you'll have a pretty good idea of what it is. And quite frankly, after the last time we did this presentation, 3 or 4 club members went out and bought parts, and they built a NVIS antenna, and it worked. And so anyway, we are going to roll right ahead here. And oh, by the way, my cohort tonight, as Dan mentioned, is AE0GQ, right off the cover of the magazine. I know you get that joke all the time, Tom, but you know, it's kind of fun to do it anyway. So here's the next slide. And here's Tom.
First off, the joke isn't too bad. I figure that somebody at the FCC hated me, and that's how I got that call. Let's talk about what is NVIS, and I need to slip over here. It stands for Near Vertical Incident Skywave. It's been used for many, many years, but the term itself is somewhat recent. At least it's a more official term. It's the total opposite of what hams tend to use as DX, that is long distance. The thing about NVIS, and I probably want to hit your space bar, so there you go. And the thing about it is NVIS is local to medium distance, which means it's about 0 to 250 miles.
So when we talk about ordinary propagation, we want our signal to travel a long distance. So if you're in your station tonight working and you're working FT8 and you see some people from Ukraine pop up, you're wanting your signal to travel long distances to work Ukraine. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a low takeoff angle. And most of these antennas that we put together and build or buy do have low takeoff angles, and they're usually 30 degrees or less. Now, this is so that the signal can travel the maximum distance before it first arrives at the ionosphere. Okay, so we'll just go through this again, but I'm just pushing the buttons and we'll see what happens here. Okay, the long gap before the signal returns to Earth, and basically that's the part in between this and the end of the ground wave. That's kind of called the skip or dead zone. So it goes up, we take a low takeoff angle, we hit the ionosphere, we bounce back down, and that gap, and we hope it's a long gap, especially if we want to work Asia or Europe or whatever, then that is called skip. And some people call it the dead zone, but it's really called the skip zone.
And what we have here is a picture of what Paul was just describing. The antenna there on the left is sending out a wave which is hitting one of the layers of the ionosphere. Depends upon frequency and several other factors as to which one you're going to use. It is refracted back down towards the Earth. If it hits the Earth, it can bounce back and continue on. If you look at that, the lower the angle it takes off, the further down the way it's going to hit. And therefore, the longer the skip zone that you're going to have, the longer the distance that you're going to have. This also shows something called a ground wave.
Yeah,
and a ground wave is...
Talk about that. Talk about that for a minute, Tom.
Yep. Ground wave is actually conducted, surprisingly enough, in the ground. It's mostly used in lower frequency. In other words, a lot of your AM broadcast is ground wave. Ground wave, as the frequency goes up, becomes less efficient. It loses its potency very quickly as the frequency goes up. So 160 meters, there's a lot of ground wave. 80 meters, not so much. 10 meters, you're getting less ground wave and more direct. In Colorado, for example, we actually have a major problem with ground wave because ground wave requires that the ground be somewhat conductive. And that requires that we have something called moisture. And as you may have recognized, we don't have a lot of that around here. You will find ground wave working very nicely in moisture-laden areas, Florida, really good. You also find it if you have salt marshes, for example. Boy, that can just cover forever. One thing that's really interesting about looking at the way the ground wave proceeds, first off, it will always be vertically polarized, regardless of how it's coming off your antenna. It only is vertically polarized, and half of the wave is above the ground, and half the wave is below the ground. So it goes like that and that's a virtual ground, not the actual level of soil, but where the electrical potential is ground.
And interestingly enough, sometimes after our VHF our UHF net, and sometimes I guess even after our VHF simplex net, some of us will jump on HF. And I've always noticed it's much more difficult here than it was when I lived in Oklahoma to make contacts short distance. And most of the time we are trying to communicate using ground wave. And if you hear there's a group of guys that get on 80 meters every morning. And one of the things that enhances their ability to communicate a little bit is they run a lot of power, but they're still operating, they're still communicating with each other using ground wave. And occasionally, not that often, but occasionally I've noticed that all of us are communicating locally using Skywave. The skip zone is just very, very, very short, and we call the band being short. And sometimes when the skip zone is allows us to operate greater distances, we call that the band is long. So you may hear people talking about that occasionally, but for the most part, the reason we have so much trouble around here with some simple communications from here at Castle Rock on 40 meters is very often that we are using ground wave. And again, Tom mentioned that no moisture in the soil. And that's also why sometimes tuning these vertical antennas, we don't quite get the same type of results that are shown in the instruction manual. So we set all of the dimensions the way the book says to install the antenna, although it does say usually your mileage may vary. Well, our mileage varies a lot sometimes. We do exactly the right dimensions according to the manual, but we don't get some of the results. We have to make additional adjustments and changes. Okay. NVIS propagation. Okay, so in order for our signal to travel either locally or a medium distance, as Tom mentioned a minute ago, up to 250 miles approximately, the signal must take off, the RF signal must take off at a high angle from the antenna. And that typically means 60 to 90 degrees. Now, as we mentioned before, most of the antennas that we use have much lower angle, much lower takeoff angles, and typically in the 30-degree range or less. But we're needing something 60 to 90 degrees. And so this type of signal using a high angle of takeoff will return from the ionosphere at a similar angle. And we're hoping to operate in that 0 to 250 nautical mile range. And it works, absolutely works. So it thus fills in the skip zone or dead zone, like taking a hose and spraying it into an umbrella. So I don't know who wrote that, but that's a pretty good example, right? You spray the water up into the umbrella, and it comes straight back down, and it doesn't really go much further than the diameter of the antenna. So of the umbrella. So basically, that's what we're doing. We're sending it straight up, or as close to that as possible, and it's coming directly back down. And that's what we want, because we're trying to accomplish this short range communications path. Now, this is a question that we can talk about maybe as we go through the presentation, but if everybody that jumps on our little impromptu HF nets after our other nets had an NVIS antenna, what would that mean? How would that change some of the frustration levels that we run into occasionally?
And now we have a diagram of what Paul was talking about. And you notice in this one, the ionosphere is rather flat compared to the previous diagram where it was curved. I heard a very good example. And the ionosphere, the F layer can be quite a distance above the surface of the Earth, several hundred kilometers, as a matter of fact. But the example I heard was, if you take an orange and pretend that's the Earth, on the inside of the peel is the surface of the Earth, and the outside of the peel is where the highest layer of the ionosphere would be. So that gives you kind of an idea of how it really does fit. What you'll see here is, you notice it's going straight up and coming straight down. Who uses it, by the way? And this really wasn't addressed that I saw, Paul, in the thing, but I'll tell you who's the biggest user of NVIS, and that's the military. Hams are not big users of NVIS except for local nets, because frankly, we want to go use our half-watt QRP transmitter and reach Cameroon with FT8, and we're powering it by rubbing a balloon in our head. We want to do that. We go for that DX. NVIS is not all that popular except for local nets, and those aren't nearly as major occupation of hams as other activities. But the military, they love it. They use that because they have deployments at over 100, 150, 200 miles, and they need to have good communication. And there are no repeaters going up all over the place for them, for that. Of course, times have changed. They now have satellite communication and big changes there. But they still use NVIS. And one of the things you'll see very often, if you look in the old movies, you'll see that great big whip antenna tied over the Jeep, tied to the front bumper with a rope. So it's almost horizontal. You know what that is? That's an NVIS antenna. Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, and we're going to have a little more on that here in just a minute. We talked a little bit about the military using it, but also we had a guest speaker from Northcom come talk to us, and it's used by FEMA. NVIS is used by Ares and many other agencies that in an emergency need to be able to make shorter communications paths. And a good example was Katrina. A good example are all the hurricanes where you have an area of devastation, or certainly an area that they're responsible for in the emergency that usually extends out a couple hundred miles potentially. So if you go to the FEMA headquarters, well, not the national headquarters, but if you go to the FEMA regional office out in West Denver, they have numerous NVIS antennas. And by the way, Tom calls it NVIS. I call it NVIS. It's either way is perfectly acceptable. All right, let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so if you want to use NVIS successfully, we said you have to have a high angle of radiation from the antenna. You want to minimize the ground wave because it'll interfere with the returning skywave. So we do not want ground wave. We want to avoid that at all possible. And most importantly, and I can't really emphasize this enough, but you definitely need to choose the correct frequency band, because like anything else, you go too high in frequency and your signal will pass through the ionosphere right into space, right? So knowing what frequency is usable is very, very important for NVIS communications. Now, if you're the military, you're going to be a little bit limited as to what your radio can do. It's going to operate on a frequency that has been known, has been designed to operate in that 200, 250 mile distance. But if you're a ham, you have a little more options than the radio operator on the back of the Humvee. Okay, Tom?
Let's talk about choosing the right frequency. And you have to remember that the ionosphere is composed of several layers, the DE, F1, and F2. By the way, F1 and F2, it may be simply an F region rather than splitting like that. The D layer, and to a lesser extent the E layer, but certainly the D layer, which shows up during the daytime, bless it, will sit there and suck up any kind of radio energy you put out. That's why very often you notice we get our best DX later at night. The best returns that you're going to get, because it's the highest up, is the F2 layer. Now, what you need to know is what's called the critical frequency of the F2 layer. And a little bit later, I'm going to show you how you can find it out locally, because we have a little transmitter in Boulder that helps us out there. What you want to do is you want to be a little bit below the critical frequency. You notice it's FOF2. So I'll point that one out when it comes to that point.
Thank you, Tom. FOF2. I like it. Very good. All right, let's go on here. Okay, NVIS for the radio amateur. So in practice, and this is almost always true, 7 megahertz, or for us 40 meters in the 7 megahertz band, is usually the highest band that we can use. We're not going to get too much NVIS activity higher than that particular band. Although it happens, it's just usually not going to be something that we'll ever see in our operation. 3.5 megahertz, which 80 meters, 75, 80 meters, is the next lowest band. And the top band, as those of us like to call it, that enjoy working 160 meters, like Justin and I and John and a few people, that's definitely the lowest band. Around 1.8 megahertz, is probably the lowest frequency you're going to be able to use NVIS on. So 80 and 160 meters are strongly affected during the day by absorption from the D layer, plus noise at night, various times of the year. So if you're trying to use NVIS on 160 meters during the day, it's probably not going to work. And same way with 80 meters. So we've always needed a middle transition frequency, and we got it, right? We got it about, I think about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, 10 to 15 years ago. The gentleman that came to talk to us from Northcom, by the way, is going to come back as soon as we can get into a room and have our meeting there. It was a fantastic presentation. He coordinates all of the communications protocols between the military and everybody else that uses HF. And he was one of the people that actually put together the proposal to give hams 60 meters or 5 megahertz privileges. And so his explanation as to how this ban came about and what he and his team did and why they did it to try to get hams on this ban is really an amazing story. So I won't linger too long on this, but I will tell you that if you haven't tried the 5 megahertz band, it's most likely in your radio programmed as a memory channel. So I'll say that again. 5 megahertz is programmed into your late model radio, usually as a memory channel from the factory. Not all radios are that way. Some of them have direct access, but the reason that it's done that way is because this is a channelized band. And the reason it's channelized is because we share this band with the military and FEMA and people like that, and everything they do is channelized, right? They don't go to, hey, Tom, I'll meet you on 14.325. They don't know how to do that. They know to go to channel 7, okay? So as a result of the military and being instrumental in working with the amateur community to get this band available for our use, one of the agreements was between the FCC and ARRL and everybody that was participating was that it needs to be channelized. And so that's why in most of the newer radios it is set up in your radio as a channel, as a memory channel. Check it out sometime. It is not only good for NVIS, it's good for communications during the day and some at night, but mainly during the day for distances up to hundreds of miles. So great for NVIS, but also fantastic just for regular communications. Now, if you were watching the hurricane stuff here a couple weeks ago, what was reported on one of our nets? That was FEMA is asking hams not to use one of those channels because it's being used for the hurricane. And because we share the frequency, we all said, okay, yeah, we don't need to use that frequency. We don't need to use that channel. Also keep in mind that on the 5 megahertz band, once a year, we are able to participate in a military radio test and communicate with military operators on that band. Okay, so anyway, that's kind of a cool band if you haven't played with it. If you have a wire antenna with a tuner, a wide-ranging tuner, you probably can tune the antenna for that band. If you are running other types of antennas, maybe not so much. But again, check it out. That was my little note on 60 meters. And we will move on now. Back to you, Tom.
I was going to add something to the 60 meter. There is a frequency that's not in the 60 meters, but it's 5 megahertz. It's like 5.175 or something, that is used as the emergency frequency in Alaska. It is the statewide emergency frequency. And the reason they use that is because Alaska uses a tremendous amount of NVIS to communicate between these villages, which are often extremely isolated from each other. So I decided to toss that out there. Let's talk about the antenna side, though. Remember, we were talking about needing a high angle of radiation. We want the thing to go straight up. We do not want it to go out partly at a low angle because we're not looking for distance. We want it to be that umbrella that Paul was talking about. Therefore, verticals, which are sold for having absolutely wonderful low angles and therefore good for DX, well, they don't do real well with NVIS. A half-wave dipole, no matter how it's fed, at the quote textbook height, which is half a wavelength, that does have a lobe that is low angle, but like most of us, it's probably lower than half a wavelength, particularly if you're talking about, let's say, 80 meters. You know, that gets pretty darn high up there. So if it's lower, particularly if it's like a quarter wavelength above the ground, then it earns the wonderful title of cloud burner. It is definitely sending out a high angle lobe. You don't want it too low, though, because if it gets too low, you're going to end up coupling against the ground, and you're going to end up with ground losses. One of the really nice antennas that they used in Alaska, and therefore it's applicable to anything, is they do a cubical quad, except they lay it sideways, meaning they put up a square that is a quarter wavelength on the side. They feed it on one end, and on the ground they put another bit of wire that simply matches, and they use that as a reflector, and that is definitely pointed right straight up. Paul's going to show you another example of an antenna coming up.
Yeah, and one other just quick comment about the antenna piece. If you have ever installed a dipole antenna and you wonder why it's not working to operate, to make communications, to make QSOs with stations beyond about 200 miles, well, maybe you have it installed in a way where it's a little bit too close to the ground. And so you built an NVIS antenna and you didn't realize it. So for those of you that don't have a lot of trees but are installing half-wave dipoles, keep in mind that you need to be about a half wavelength above the ground. And if you're not, and the closer you get to the ground, closer you get to a quarter wavelength, then that's what the antenna is going to do. It's going to just send the signal straight up, or certainly have a higher angle of takeoff than it would if you had it at textbook height. Now, we can't always install dipoles at textbook height. So that's okay. Just so you kind of understand what you have and how it works. There's still a lot of contacts to be made at that shorter distance. So anyway, we'll go on to the next, and I know that for a fact because I built one time and it didn't work and like I wanted it to, and that's what I did. Okay, here is an example of a dipole that is designed for NVIS operation. And you see a couple poles in the ground, some grass down there. You've got what's called a reflector. You've got the driven element. You have some distances. And Tom, let's see, anything else you want to add on that particular slide?
No, just simply, if you look, the reflector is slightly longer, just like it is in the Yagi.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Basically, that's a 2-element Yagi pointing straight up.
Absolutely. And if we all had one of those, we probably would do a little better on our after net, so to speak. Okay, Tom, over to you.
As I say, NVIS has been around for a long time, but the term has not been around a long time. In other words, we knew it existed, we just didn't have a name for it. For example, it was, as you can see, used in D-Day for communication between the operations HQ at Uxbridge, which was obviously in England, the control ship USS Ancon, and the landing parties. All of them were able to talk to each other using high-angle Skywave. And they also found out that verticals did a lousy job, which is why I was mentioning the long whip antenna tied to the front bumper of your Jeep, that tank antenna with the loading coil, because that turns it into a vertical. The Germans also used NVIS or NVIS mobile antennas in World War II. And I'll tell you what, Beveridge's antenna is definitely not an NVIS antenna. If you want to go look that one up, I guarantee that one. I think you'll find that it's a fun way of approaching the hobby. I have all 50 states except for Wyoming. I need to get some NVIS work done so I can get somebody in Wyoming to respond. Paul?
Well, and a couple other notes on World War II. And I'm sorry, I cannot think of Peter's call sign right now. In the middle of this, my brain's not working well, but we have a club member named Peter, and he does a presentation of, he actually brings World War II aircraft transmitters and receivers that all operate, they all work. He rolls it in on a cart to our face-to-face meeting or Elmer Night, and he gives us a presentation of all of the World War II aircraft radios, and they actually work, and it's amazing. And I will just throw that out in that if you have any questions about NVIS in World War II, about the Germans using it or the Allies, grab Peter at one of the meetings, and not only will he tell you anything you want to know, just put a bug in his ear. Hey, we kind of like to see your presentation again, and he'll be happy to do that. But that's fantastic. He knows more about it than anyone I've ever met about how this type of communication was used in the Second World War. And then one other thing that I noted was several of us were at Dayton a couple years ago, and Justin kind of comes to mind, but he and I were looking at loop antennas, and a little bit off the subject, but we were looking at loop antennas. We were going to buy one and everything, and we kind of got these loop antennas in our head. And then we went to the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson, and we started seeing all of these loop antennas on all the old German and U.S. Aircraft from the World War I, World War II, and it was just kind of interesting. But there were also antennas on aircraft that were definitely designed for this type of operation as well. So it's amazing if you ever get to that museum, and I strongly suggest that you do. There is nothing like it in the world. And you'll see a lot of antennas and a lot of NVIS antennas as well. Okay, Tom, over to you.
That's your slide, sir. You get to do the summary.
Well, as we've mentioned, NVIS or NVIS is designed for 0 to 250 miles using high angle takeoff from the antenna, 60 to 90 degrees, and always a skywave, never a ground wave. the choice of the correct frequency band just below the critical frequency is most important. Now, Tom may talk a little bit more about the critical frequency in just a minute. We discussed it a little bit when we talked about HF operation. You may remember a couple of months ago, we talked about the critical frequency and all that. So if you get a chance, go back and review those slides on that. But choice of your frequency is very, very important. Antenna must be horizontal. If you're trying to do NVIS with a vertical antenna, it will not work. And the exception of that are magnetic loop antennas. And I'm not qualified to discuss that, but that's what the slide says. And antennas must be low, between 1/4 and 0.15 of a wavelength above the ground. And the NVIS or NVIS antenna has omnidirectional radiation. Interesting, isn't it? Omnidirectional radiation. So it is not directional in most cases. And if you're going to actually use NVIS for communications purposes in an emergency, or you have to get that message through, then you're going to need either 3 different antennas or 2, but you're going to have to cover more than one band, because 5 megahertz is not going to work during part of that 24-hour period, and 7 megahertz is not going to work for part of that 24-hour period. So I have seen military antennas that are multiband, that are designed for NVIS transmissions. And if they don't use an actual multiband antenna, they use some type of tuner that allows that antenna that's been over and tied off on the front of the Humvee. It allows that antenna to operate as a multiband antenna. But as you know, using a tuner, a lot of the RF energy is going to be sucked up in the tuner. So you're going to have a little more issue with the antenna being as functional as you'd like for it to be. But that's also why the military sometimes runs a lot more power than maybe we would in a similar situation to overcome some of that.
Paul, I know this is the goodbye slide, so hold on just a second there, because I'm going to see if I can steal the screen from you.
Yes, yes. So we have more. Everybody stay put, stay in your seat. We have some very, very good information coming up.
I think you have to stop presenting for just a second.
And I am. Stand by, please.
And I'm going to see if I can present.
And I'm having a little difficulty with this, so stand by.
No problem.
Okay, there we go.
Actually, can I do it this way? Can you see it all right there, Mr. Control Room, Mr. Wayne?
Not yet. Oh, no. You're only showing it on your camera. You're not actually presenting.
Okay, thank you. Ah, there you are. I have 2 screens, so I need to know which one I'm going to present. There we go.
We got a flicker, though. Yeah, your video driver didn't like that.
Oh, good.
There you go. It's good now.
It's good now? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. One of the really handy things to have is called an ionosonde, which is a transmitter that sends signals from generally about 1 megahertz to 30 megahertz. And guess what? It does it right straight up, and it waits for the return signal. And it's to give you the health of the ionosphere, how it's acting. One of the manufacturers out there is, as you can see on the screen, Digisonde. They make a portable one. But the reason I brought that up is because they're really nice. And if you scroll down, and by the way, that's DIGISONDE is how it's spelled. And that's the website, digisonde.com. If you scroll down, you'll see there is a map of all of the Digisonde stations out there, including one, which I will zoom in on, in Boulder, Colorado. So we can get it here. By the way, it's also handy if you're trying to get from, say, here to Europe. You might want to look at what Wallops Island's looking like on the way across, because the ionosphere above that is what you're trying to bounce off for DX. But let's go ahead and take a look at Boulder. And I already did it because I warn you, it's a little slow in loading. But you'll get a screen that looks like that. And that has this month's, we have to go back one. I'm not going to load it. It has the years because it has several years of history. What you're seeing on the top here, that is the months right there. And the number that you're seeing, like 245, 274, that happens to be the day of the year. Let me go ahead and pick up September. And it is coming, I promise. That is the day of the month. And I'm going to pick yesterday, the 23rd. By the way, warning, this is in GMT. I know we aren't on the 24th yet, or I should say UTC time. This is currently 6 hours ahead of us. But let me pop down and get, say, 7:15 UTC, which is about 1:15 our time. I will click on that one, and we will get a picture. Eventually. It is spinning. I'm picking this because I already looked at it. I don't know what the current conditions are. I'll look at that in just a second. By the way, you notice these are coming out about every 15 minutes. That is a picture of the ionosphere at 1:15 this morning. That's mountain time. This little chunk right here at the bottom, that's the E layer. And if you ever see it all the way across, you're seeing sporadic E. It will be the same height and it'll be the same for every frequency because sporadic E does not depend upon frequency. It's kind of peculiar. This strange little line with the dashes in there, that's the actual F layer return. That's what's coming back. And then you have these weird pink and green stripes. The pink that you see there, when the radio wave hits the ionosphere and is refracted, it actually splits into two, called the ordinary and the extraordinary wave. And interestingly enough, the extraordinary wave moves slower, so it's refracted more. The pink is the ordinary wave. The green is the extraordinary wave. In other words, they both work. It's just that one's circularly polarized one way and one is circularly polarized the other way. The reason you're seeing it doubled here and here is because it's making two trips. The signal is coming from the ground, right here at 60 kilometers, but that's close enough to ground. It's going up, it's hitting, it's bouncing back, it's going up, and it's bouncing back. But that double trip is shown as like this ghost that you see at the top. Okay? In other words, what you're seeing is how long does it take before the signal comes back? When you see it doubling like that, that means that you are seeing a double reflection. It's coming from the ground and going back up again. The one that we were talking about was F0 or FO F2. And that's sitting right here at the very top. And it says 2.7. That is the critical NVIS frequency at that time of night. In other words, you ain't going to get much unless you are on 160 meters. 2.7 megahertz is below 80. It isn't going to do real well. Let me go back to something that's a little closer today. I believe that I have seen these go by at various times. If you look at your waterfall, say on 20 or 40 meters, and you see this weird little pattern of little dashes that are moving up frequency, there'll be a little dash and then a space and a little dash and a space and a little dash and a space. I do believe what you're seeing is Boulder's signal. This was taken at 1910, so that would be 110, I think, right? No, 310. No, 110. Sorry, I have trouble with converting, subtracting 6 and making that into English terms. But you notice at the top, the FOF2 is now 4.9 megahertz. Guess what? You're going to have some really good NVIS if you're talking on 80 meters. And you can also see that we have a bigger F layer here. Actually, what you're seeing is this little weird spike right here and here. Do you see that? Is that showing up? I don't know. Is my mouse working at that point?
Yeah, it is.
What you're seeing is that's one F1 rather, and that's F2. You're seeing the two F layers. There are two layers at this point. Earlier, when you saw that didn't have that little double loop in there, there was only a single F region. That's really all that I have. However, I will tell you that this is kind of handy to have to take a look at. You can look at it for 15 minutes ago and see what it is and see what your critical frequency is. But there's all this other information, which I would very much encourage you to go look at. I would suggest that, oh, by the way, this maximum usable frequency that says 3,000 kilometers, you notice it says 16. They're suggesting right now you ought to be around the 14 megahertz band there and enjoying yourself for some DX right now. That's what you're looking at. If that were current. Remember, that's a few hours before. Sorry. To learn more about that, there are a number of articles on the net. Some of them get crazy. This one happens to be written by the guy that owns the company, a doctor, PhD, that owns the company and makes that particular piece of equipment. But this one is from example out of Radcom, and that talks about what all those mean and how to use it and what good it is. If you just spend a little bit of time, I think you'll find that it works out. It's very useful to see what the conditions are like. And let me stop presenting, and we'll go back to Paul.
And I'll just note that, and thank you, Tom. That was really, really interesting. I've never seen that before. I've heard of the station up there, but you indicating that those lines we see on our SDR sometimes is that government agency transmitting. That's very interesting. I think you're probably right with that. The other thing I was going to note is on a few of the slides, there was a comment on the top that said courtesy of Barrett, BARRETT Communications. If you go to their website, you'll see some of the equipment that they purchase, commercial equipment they purchase or that they manufacture for NVIS communications. I think pretty much it's all commercial for commercial use. I don't know if they sell to any military groups or not, but check them out. They're a very interesting company. Their equipment is very, very high dollar, but very high end. And that was Barrett Communications. So that's everything that Tom and I know about NVIS, right, Tom?
That is correct. That's definitely all that I know, which I'm not going to add anything further.
So we really appreciate you being here for the presentation tonight. Let's go over to Wayne and see if Wayne has, if there are any questions out there that have been posted. And if not, we can get questions from individuals that are on the Google's Meets tonight, I believe is the best way to do that. So Wayne, let me throw it to you first.
Yeah, nothing on YouTube as of yet, but yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments on YouTube Live.
Okay, are there any questions from anyone that's on the Google Meets that'd like to unmute and ask any questions?
Hey guys, Dan and 2SRK here. I got a quick question for you. So, just like any other antenna principle, obviously, the more wire and the higher up you have it, the better. Is there any sort of, I would say, minimums as far as the overall height of the antenna is concerned that you'd want to have, particularly for those that are in maybe covenant restricted homes?
Yeah, if you looked at that slide, it covered the distances, but basically you don't want to be, you want to be about a quarter of a wavelength above the ground. But anything below that, it's not going to operate very well. And you do not want to be closer to the optimal height for a standard dipole, which is half a wavelength above the ground. So you need to be about a quarter of a wavelength above the physical ground.
Excellent. Thank you.
Tom,
I was just going to say that for those of us in HOAs, NVIS is our preferred way of actually transmitting, because that's what we're stuck with. We can't get to the optimal half wavelength above the ground, unfortunately.
Very true, Tom. Very true.
Any other questions?
Well, Paul, we either confused them or put them to sleep.
I had a question. I know that you were talking about it's basically a 2-element Yagi, but what if you actually had a Yagi and stood it on its tail end? It's only maybe 15 feet long from front to back or whatever, or maybe they're, depending on, frequencies, of course, but if you actually stood a Yagi on its butt end, make sure it wasn't touching the ground, what do you think that would be like as far as an NVIS?
You would have a wonderful NVIS antenna. It would work. You do need to get the reflector a bit off of the ground because you need to have you'd have capacity of coupling, which is going to affect the effective length of that last reflector element. So it may not work quite as well, but no, you've got as I say, one of the antennas used in Alaska for NVIS is basically a cubical quad, which is, two one wave length squares that are separated, and the back one is a reflector. They just take that and go, whoops, and they point it right straight up.
Yeah, because I've actually seen another diagram where someone had built spiral quad basically thing. It was like they just spiraled the element in on either end, and then stood them where they pointed up, and he had several of them on different fence posts in his backyard, so he had different frequencies covered for NVIS. So I was just wondering if the actual Yagi would be just as good, if not better.
Actually, a Yagi in some ways would be better, because the antenna in the form of a helix is definitely very susceptible to polarization.
Roger. Yeah.
Okay, and if it's curled one way, the circular polarization occurs either right hand or left hand. And interestingly enough, when you transmit and you go through the ionosphere, because of the magnetic field, it does split into two different waves. It will go different directions, by the way. And one is circularly polarized left, and the other is circularly polarized right. If you saw on that ionosonde, it showed it had the magenta and the green. The way they can tell which one's the ordinary wave and which one's the extraordinary wave is one of those is polarized one way and the other one's polarized the other way.
Makes sense. Okay, that was just my question. It's just the idea of being able to stretch wire, in quarter wavelengths, like you said, in HOAs is one thing. Getting them up in the air is another. But if you had in some way to do it, like with a Yagi that was kind of in the configuration of like some ham sticks or something to that effect or whatever like that, I was just curious on what you'd end up with.
I would also suggest that NVIS at one point, NVIS, was more important to hams than it is now. And that's in the name of the organization that we ought to belong to. If you don't, let's make sure you should. That's the American Radio Relay League. And that's because they were doing NVIS from station to station to station because that had to be a consistent ability to transmit. You needed to be able to get to your next relay station consistently. So you weren't going long distances. You were trying for the next guy over.
Yeah, and the military has that figured out very, very well. I mean, even with their satellite stuff and everything like that, they're still experts on that short range communications, and it's been used in every war since World War II, and was used in Vietnam and Korean, Vietnam War, Gulf Wars, still used today. If you ever see any military communications vehicles running around, you'll notice they all have NVIS antennas and equipment inside to make that communications happen. So maybe someday we can get a military person in to talk about that a little bit. But
if you look at the Federal Center, there's a section over on the southwest side that has it used to be there, had a whole bunch of antennas in it. And several of them would sort of look kind of like a disc cone almost, except they weren't solid enough, but they had wires at a weird angle. Those are NVIS antennas.
Yeah.
Well,
I could see
a practical standpoint, like you were talking about from the famous, also depending on the size of disaster that you're working or what, not have to be a disaster, but if there was a power outage or a tornado or whatever like that, you don't necessarily want to talk to people in Spokane, Washington. You want to talk to people, maybe a county or two away, and NVIS would be a way to do that using high frequency, RHF, where you could get more localized help, even though your particular location may be impacted, but 100, 200 miles away, you're going to have a better response time, and people are going to be more geared up to what you're going through.
And I'll tell you something that is interesting, maybe that if you look at the government agencies, not just FEMA, but the Marshal Service, the FBI, those types of organizations, they all operate HF from all their local offices, and some of them are using, well, quite a few of them are using automatic link control, which we'll do a whole presentation on ALC. It's amazing, but as part of their automatic link control, that integrates into their NVIS communications suites as well. So, but you'll find NVIS transceivers with almost every government agency.
Well, Paul, I suppose we ought to ask if there are actual Elmering questions now.
I won't see anything on YouTube Live for probably a minute or two on that. But anybody in the Google Meets with any questions?
Any questions about anything, we'll throw it open.
Right.
No, I think that answers why those sweeps are going on the SDR. You always wondered what was going on. So
Yeah, I see that quite often.
Yeah.
Can I say I drew that conclusion because of the timing of them and the pattern of them. I do not know for sure that's what it is, but it matches what the timing is of the
Right.
diagram.
That answers a lot of questions, doesn't it, Randy?
yeah, and especially if you chase it like I did right up the spectrum. I just kept following it on the scope and just kept going and going and going out of the ham bands and just finally kind of died off. I forgot where it died off, but it was quite a bit above 40 or 20 actually. So interesting.
Well, good. If there's no more questions, then we're gonna thank you for giving Tom and I the opportunity to present this, and we're gonna throw it back over to Dan. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I did mention last time, Dan, that we're about out of our recycled presentations, and I've got a couple in the works, and I know a couple other people are working on some too. But anybody in the Parker Radio Association, it doesn't matter, if you've been with us for 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, right? If anyone has any suggestions for a presentation, and if there's something that you're passionate about, you'd like to put together a presentation, we'll even help you. We'll even help you. If you don't have the time to put together all the slide decks, we'll help with that. But jump in, send us a message over at parkerradio.org and say, hey, I know something about this, and I think I could do a presentation on it during Elmer Night, and we'll be happy to help you out. As Dan mentions when he talks about net control operators, it's not a John Wayne situation here. We have quite a few people that can put together the material if you can put it in a format that we can latch on to it, or you can put it together yourself. Maybe you want to do it yourself. That's great as well. But we do need presentations. I think, like most people, we're going to be in this mode for another many months anyway.
Yeah, at least
certainly probably till the first of the year. So and maybe even into 2021. So whether we're in person or whether we're on this format, we still need the presentations, because every Elmer Night or face-to-face meetings, we always do a presentation, certainly the face-to-face meetings. So anyone that wants to jump in, even if it's not maybe 100% related to amateur radio, we had a member a few years ago did the first person of video using remote control vehicles, which was very, very interesting. So jump in, help us out. We would really.
We did have a question come in. Quick question: does Douglas County and Arapahoe County participate in the CERT programs?
I can jump in on that a little bit. Most of the CERT programs, the answer is yes, but most of the CERT programs are not county specific. They're going to be municipality specific. So Parker Police, they do put on a CERT program. I believe the Aurora Police also sponsor a CERT program as well. So most of the CERT programs are not going to be county specific, but they definitely focus more on the municipality and the local towns, and typically through law enforcement.
Okay.
Now, one of the other things that's also out there that's more on a county basis would be the ARES programs for the Amateur Radio Emergency Services. Those are done through the county and typically through the local sheriff's office of each county. So the PRA, with us being in Parker, we're part of the ARES group of Douglas and Elbert counties. So they actually serve two agencies, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office as well as the Elbert County Sheriff's Office as well. So if you're interested in ARES, those are just another great group that does a pretty significant amount of training. They have tremendous resources and repeater infrastructure as well, but definitely their training is definitely high up there, within Douglas and Elbert County. And I know Arapahoe County goes through a lot of training as well. Major participants in weather spotting. So when we get into hail and tornado time and severe thunderstorms, I've actually had 2 instances where I received training through the Aries group as a spotter for the National Weather Service. And in the last 3-4 years, I've had 2 phone calls directly from the National Weather Service in Boulder. They go, hey, we know you're on the air. We know you're spotting. We're showing this on the radar. Can you confirm? So pretty neat to be participatory in that.
Nice. And another thing, Paul, if you want to mention about this weekend.
Well, I'd be happy to, Wayne. The little portable deployment group called the Parker Militia, as we're known, is deploying out to Castlewood Canyon State Park this weekend. And we're meeting at 7 o'clock in the parking lot on the north side of the park off Highway 86. The information came out last week in the blast, and you can take a look at that. We have a site we're going to be deploying equipment, antennas and radios very close to the parking lot. We also have a site that's a little further out if you want to get a little farther away from the parking lot. And then some of us are going to take a 1.2-mile hike up an incline to a little summit where we're going to set up communications equipment. So if you have some portable equipment you'd like to bring out and set up, feel free to come out. If you'd like to just come out and join us and see what other people are doing, feel free to do that as well. We usually have about half the people that show up are there simply to observe and get ideas and figure out how they're going to build their portable deployment package. So come on out. Again, we're going to meet at 7 a.m. Should be a beautiful morning Saturday. And, Wayne always makes the most contacts, but
No.
usually. So watch what Wayne does, and you're going to learn a lot. But I'm bringing my equipment this time, and that's this coming Saturday, the 26th, at Castlewood Canyon State Park on the north side of the park.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I was going to say, normally on Thursdays we have an Elmer Night on W0 CFI. We will not tomorrow night because it is the Simplex net, and you can find frequencies and so on the website, parkerradio.org, and I would strongly urge you to go to the website because you'll find a lot of very good information. And if you're a member, be sure and check into the forums because there's been a lot of interesting things being done there. And to preempt SRK, with almost 200 members, if every member took only one net a year, we would have an entire year's worth of nets covered. So seriously, we had, I'm sorry, I can't remember his call, but we had a new net control last night, and he did a fantastic job. And I think
Craig did well.
He did a beautiful job, and I hope that if you haven't done one, trust me, you're going to have somebody who will give you all the help in the world. It's not you'll love doing it. It only kills you the first time. From then on, it is an absolute joy. And actually, I should say it only kills you the first 5 minutes. After you get started in the thing, you're just going to go for it. So please consider becoming a net control operator, and you can sign up on the website, which is parkerradio.org.
So we could all say this together now. All say this together. Ready? It's not a
John Wayne event.
Over to you, Dan.
All right. Well, Paul, Tom, I can't thank you guys enough. I mean, it's just an absolutely fantastic presentation. You guys absolutely knocked it out of the park. you know, the beauty behind antennas, they're great when they work, and boy, are they frustrating when they don't. But at the same time too, I'm a big believer that any antenna is better than no antenna. So get out there, experiment, do it now before the snow starts flying, because we're not that far away from that cold white stuff coming down. And boy, messing with wire antennas in the cold is just absolutely no fun. But again, you know, just an absolute kudos to Tom and Paul. This is just a wonderful example of two Parker Radio Association members that are not only passionate about the amateur radio service, but they're using their skill sets and their knowledge to share that with the not only with the Parker Radio Association, but the amateur radio community. So Tom and Paul, thank you guys so much for just another job. Absolutely well done. Definite round of applause for you. And you guys just, again, knocked it out of the park. As Paul had mentioned, we're always looking for new ideas and new presentations, either for our monthly meeting or for the Elmer Night. You know, one of the things I'll throw out as a challenge, and I don't know how many people are aware of this, the International Space Station actually has a repeater that is back on the air and is actually gaining a lot of traction. So even with something as simple as a handy-talkie, yes, a little 5-watt handy-talkie, you can actually access the International Space Station repeater and talk to other hams through that repeater. So maybe there's an idea there to throw out as a possible presentation on how to make repeater contacts through the International Space Station. Pretty cool stuff there for sure. So, you know, again, if there's any one thing that you're passionate about within the hobby, it could be radio programming. It could be SDR receivers. It could be some people picked up a new flex radio. Maybe you picked up a new HF radio that not only do you want to brag about, but you want to give some instruction on. You know, maybe a new D-Star radio. And, you know, I'll be the first one to admit, when I bought a D-Star radio back in, it was probably 2012, 2013, I thought I made a $500 mistake because I didn't understand it. And it took me about 6 months of pounding my head against the desk going, do I sell this radio or not, before everything finally started to click. And the goal of these Elmer Nights is to take what I went through, and again, maybe your bandwidth is a lot shorter than mine, but a 6-month frustration, our goal is to make that this close and really shorten that gap as far as the learning curve, because we really want people to not only enjoy the hobby, but participate in it, have fun. And that's, you know, two of the really key things, not only behind the PRA, but behind the amateur radio service and the art and the promotion of what we do as well. So Tom also gave some great kudos about joining the ARRL. Would love to have you as a member of the ARRL as well. I get the privilege of serving as vice director for the Rocky Mountain Division. And again, your ARRL is hard at work. There's been a lot of changes that have taken place here recently, a new CEO that has taken over, which has been fantastic. And yeah, and Paul's showing the On the Air magazine, which is a great magazine that comes out. So when you join the ARRL, you actually have a choice. You can get monthly QST, which is a wonderful, wonderful magazine delivered to your door monthly, or quarterly, you can actually receive a great publication called On the Air. So On the Air is one of the more recent publications that the ARRL has come out with, and it's really geared towards the new ham, the newly licensed ham, or those that maybe are getting back into the hobby. Some absolutely fantastic articles that are in here. Not only for the beginner level, but again, you know, a schlep like me, 27 years into the hobby, this is just a fantastic, fantastic publication that comes out. That comes out quarterly, On the Air magazine. Really, really great stuff that's in there. And last but not least, one of the cool things that's also in there as part of your ARRL membership is that you have access online to all of the publications. Which is really cool. So not only On the Air magazine and QST, there's QEX, which is a really cool publication for those that really like to experiment and horse around on the experimentation side. And then there's also the National Contest Journal. What Tom had mentioned as far as contesting is concerned, I didn't even have a pipe dream of ever getting into a contest when I first got into amateur radio. But it took me doing net control one time to get my feet wet and saying, you know what, I think I can handle this. And it wasn't 2 weekends later that I participated in my first contest at 14 years old, because I had the confidence of what I went through and the experience of being a net control station. And being a net control station within the PRA, again, not a John Wayne position. It is absolutely one you're going to have a plethora of support. You're going to have people rooting you on. If you mess up, it's okay. It's part of the learning experience. We'll help get you back on track. Even if you lose your place, you can say, hey, backup net control, I lost my place. Where should I be? We'll guide you right back to there. So no sweat there whatsoever. Two of the key things within being a net control operator, you really hone in your listening and copying skills, two absolutely pertinent aspects within amateur radio. And that only acts as a springboard to go forward with a lot of other amateur radio activities, whether it's contesting, serving within the Aries group, giving presentations like this, like Paul and Tom have done. Maybe there's a presentation lined up on the basics of doing net control. So just throwing out all kinds of ideas and some of those that are coming up. So again, if there's something within the amateur radio service that you are passionate about and you want to share, let us know. Drop us a line, reach out to us on our Contact Us tab at www.parkerradio.org. So that is my spiel. And again, Tom, Paul, just a fantastic job, guys. I can't thank you guys enough for just a job very, very well done. I love the detail that you guys had in your presentation and your slides. Very easy to follow. And boy, the detail there was just fantastic. So great job, gentlemen. Great job.
Yeah, one other thing that I wanted to add, feel free to, for the new people, feel free to come out this weekend. And if there's any new, general technician or general stations, feel free to reach out to any of us. We'd be more than happy to jump on HF and maybe stir up some traffic and maybe get a little round robin going on in HF land on 20 or 40.
And even, yeah, that's a great point, Wayne. And even if you're a technician or maybe you're just studying and looking to get your license, join the group as well on Saturday. Go on the hike. They'll get you on the air. They'll either let you use one of their call signs via third party, and maybe there could be an activation of the club call sign, K0PRA. You never know. So those options are absolutely available. So even if you don't have the license yet, or maybe you just don't have the band privileges yet, hang out with one of these guys or gals that are doing the hike and getting on the air. Boy, I'll tell you what, once you get on the air, you're absolutely hooked.
And if you want, invite your spouse. I know Shelby's coming along with a hike, and she's not all that interested in amateur radio, but she is interested in taking a hike. So, everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome.
I'd just like to throw in, I did my first net control a couple of weeks back, and I still live to talk about it, so it's not that painful. And it did very much so improve the listening and copying. And if you're also looking at an activity or looking for an activity to help that listening and copying, check out the Colorado Traffic League, where they pass radiograms. I mean, that's all about listening and copying. You can find them over on CallCon at 7 p.m. every night. Fantastic thing. Another good use for an NVIS antenna as far as, reaching out, but not, doing the DX would be, the radiograms as well. I know they do a lot of 20-meter stuff on NVIS. So it all kind of ties in. So just throw that out as my 2 cents, and look forward to another net control and maybe even a presentation. I have a few ideas rattling around in the empty noodle up here, and we'll see what we can get out.
Hey, Scott, that's great. And again, congratulations on getting your first net under your belt with the PRA. And like we said, it's and I think it was Tom had said it. It's like the first 5 minutes, and once you're in it, and everything flows really, really nicely. So, great job there for sure. And boy, 2 thumbs up on some ideas for presentations. That's going to be fantastic as well.
Right.
Wayne, I'll kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt someone?
No, that's it.
Okay. Wayne, kind of kick it over to you to see if there's anything you'd like to add from your side.
Nothing as of yet. The only other thing that I was going to add is, if you're not able to make it on Saturday, sometimes I do go out to a park and put an antenna dipole up in the air and call CQ with the KX3. If anybody's interested, anyone is more than welcome to come out. It's in Southeast Aurora, and I usually do it around on Sunday about 4:30, 5 o'clock, depending on weather. But it's that easy. It's it's a lot of fun just to get out on the radio, play radio, keep the squelch loose.
There you go. Yeah.
And another thing, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Dan, but the same thing with Saturday, hop on the repeater if you need a ride in. I know it is a cost to get the vehicle into the park, but there are quite a few people that do have passes that would be more than happy to troll you into the actual park, so it doesn't have to cost anything. Just hop on one of the repeaters and let us know.
Yeah, great point, Wayne, for sure. Oh, Tom, you're on mute. Go ahead, bud. You're still on mute.
I think he's saying he's good.
We could do this some night where everybody was on mute.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll probably have a lot more viewers too.
His mic's not working.
Mike, no worky. Well, glad it happened now and not in the middle of a presentation.
He has that lovely double camera set up, but what about the mic? He didn't double on that?
Yeah, that could be an issue. There'd be some major feedback there. So just kind of looking ahead to the calendar going into the month of October, our monthly face-to-face meeting, which will be here either on YouTube Live or if you're a member on Google Meets, will be taking place on Tuesday, October the 20th. So a little bit later in the month. Again, Tuesday, October 20th. Details will be coming out on that. And then our next Elmer Night will be the following Wednesday, October the 28th. So make sure you mark your calendars for that as well. So Wayne, thanks for your update. Paul, anything you'd like to add?
No, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and sitting in on this. We've had a great time as usual. And don't forget our Simplex Net tomorrow night. That's a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure Justin is going to be net control tomorrow night. And one of the cool things about the Simplex Net is, just a quick pitch for that net, is that depending upon who does it and where they're located, kind of drives whether we have a lot of relays or whether or not we, how the net operates, right? So when John, N4SJW, or I do it, and we're up on the hill up here, it's one type of net, but when other people do it from other QTH locations, it's a little different type of net. But remember, when it all goes to hell, and all the repeaters are down, we still want to communicate. We're going to be doing it on Simplex. So the point of the net is not that you hear everybody. It's that we can relay information and get that information out to a bunch of different people. And so if you haven't ever jumped on the Simplex net, give it a try. Give it a try. You may find it to be a little different than you're used to hearing, but give it a shot. 146, it's a VHF frequency, 146 and analog. So yeah, maybe we'll see you guys tomorrow night on that.
Yeah, great point, Paul. Absolutely. That's again not to be heard by everyone or hear everyone, but making sure that you're able to get relayed and the message gets through back to net control. Just absolutely a fun practice to do is to mess around with simplex, and by doing it at least once a month, it's just a good amateur practice as well. And again, maybe there's some repositioning of your VHF or UHF antenna that you need to do. Kind of like me. I've only been after that for about 10 years now. So it will get done, like all things in time.
At least 6.
At least 6.
At least 6.
It's kind of a long running project that I've had. So we'll one of these years it'll get done.
Hey, one other quick thing, Dan.
Yes.
ParkerRadio.org does have a lot of really cool stuff on it. We're getting ready to go through a major rehab of the site here, first part of the year. So if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see on the new Parker Radio Association site here later this year, please let Jeff know. AB0 Lima. Also, from time to time, there's a lot of stuff for sale under the ham gear for sale part of the forum. There's quite a few things on there right now, actually. I know because I put 4 or 5 things on there. But boy, I'll tell you what, some of the stuff that's on there from time to time is just really good bargains. I think there's an open spot 2 on there right now for $100.
What?
It's been on there for like a week.
Wow.
Hang on, I got to get on here and check that out.
So anyway, this pitch is not just for getting on there to look at what's for sale. This pitch is also about everybody can probably use a little extra ham radio cache, and you probably got a lot of stuff sitting around your shack that you could sell. I know we've talked about using QTH and QRZ and all that, but give Parker Radio a try. Give our site a try. You know, I don't
There's
know.
club
We get
discounts.
Do what?
I said there's club discounts.
There's club discounts on there. We don't get quite as much traffic, but if you got something for sale, put it on there first. Give it a couple weeks, see what happens. We're trying to build that up a little bit. That was my pitch for that. Back to net control.
Well, also to add to that, like this right here is the 3D Anderson 3D power pole thing that Jeff posted a couple days ago. That to build a Anderson power pole adapter, you know.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so I printed 2 of those up. You just got to add in the Anderson power poles and wire them in, and then they daisy chain together. So cool. Yeah, that's something he posted on there. And another Forested was asking if anybody has a spectrum analyzer to tune a duplexer UHF.
Yes,
Tom does.
All right. Tom does. Forrest, I would say probably just get on the website and shoot us an email, and we'll get you in contact.
Yeah. Tom, Eric, Dirk, John, they can all do that.
That power pole breakout, that's really cool. I'm looking at that now in the forum.
Yeah, it's cool. I just got to buy some power poles. I don't think I have enough to fill it.
How many you need? I might have a few spare.
8.
Let me dig through the treasure chest here.
All right, let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, if you give me 8, I got one for you. If you.
Hey, there we go. It sounds like a good deal there. So we'll kick it around to any of the PRA members that may be in Google Meet that want to add a comment or any final pearls of wisdom.
First off, if I hope my mic is working,
Secondly, do not unplug the second HDMI monitor while you're doing all sorts of audio and video things, because it really confuses Windows like nobody's business, which is what happened. Third, got the 3D printer right there, ready to go.
Nice.
And fourth, I really want to thank Paul, because he's the one that actually presented the slides. I just was trailing along. So thank you very much for that, Paul.
No problem.
I'd just like to say that thanks for reminding me. I need to get a bunch of stuff onto the website to sell. I got more crap. I got a pile sitting out here. So
You got treasures. It's not crap. You got treasures.
yeah, I got an antenna sitting out here. It needs to go somewhere too. So I need to get that back on there and lower the price, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and just propagation wise, we have a solar storm hitting us right now. It's going back down, but yeah, the band for tonight is fair, so it's going to be a little noisy.
Well, that's okay. You know, it's amazing. You see some of these propagation reports and solar reports, and you get on the air and you go, well, wait a minute, I'm not experiencing that. What's going on?
Right. Yeah,
And
if you
usually
catch the beginning or the back side of it, the propagation is pretty good.
And that's usually when I panic and go, what's wrong with my antenna? Why am I not hearing all this noise?
Yeah. Yeah, but we actually have a bright spot on the sun, but it doesn't have any spots under it. But it's getting more active. So
That's good. That's a good thing. So without further ado, we'll conclude the session. And again, I want to thank Paul and Tom for, again, just a great presentation. And want to thank you for joining us tonight. Obviously, we had about 15 members on the Google Meet side. And Wayne, how many do we have in YouTube?
we're currently at 14.
14?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we peaked at 18.
Wonderful. So for all that are out there in YouTube, thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here, and certainly look forward to seeing you next month. And in the meantime, if anything comes up and you need to reach out to the PRA, check out our website, www.parkerradio.org. We're also on Facebook, so if you search us up on Facebook, great Facebook page there as well. And then we do regular updates on Twitter at Parker Co Radio is our Twitter handle. So
And
again, that's about it for this one. Yep. Oh, what did I miss?
I was saying the nets, hop on the repeaters.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, get on the radio.
Maybe you're watching us from some other area. We do have a repeater that's hooked into All-Star as well, so make sure you look that up, and all the information is there on our website. So on behalf of Wayne in the control room, Wayne, great job again at Master Control. Obviously, the portals wouldn't work without you. So again, we're thankful that you're here as well. So hats off to Wayne in the control room, Paul, Tom for just a great presentation. I'm Dan, N2SRK, saying 7-3, and we'll see you next month.
7-4.
All right, 73, everyone. And we're done.